Now, the Republican representative from Oklahoma's 4th District and Deputy Majority Whip in leadership, Congressman Tom Cole. Good day to you.
Good to be with you.
Let's start here with this debate. These are a couple of members who didn't really get very far when you guys had your official conference meeting on this. Is this a legitimate challenge they want to mount tomorrow, or do you view it as sour grapes?
Well, I'll let them characterize it how they wish to do so. But frankly, it's just, in my view, unprofessional and inappropriate. We have an opportunity in the conference election to decide who the Republican nominee is going to be for Speaker. Anybody can run. And frankly, certainly Congressman Boehner quite often, Speaker Boehner quite often had opposition in those races. He welcomes that. That's fine. And unfortunately, neither of these gentlemen chose to do that. Now, they've chosen at the last minute to basically break with the conference. They're not attacking John Boehner. They're basically attacking the conference, in my view.
Congressman, you're sort of offering a little bit of just a lesson on how these things work. Not everyone knows that, though. Do you think the folks these members are appealing to, whoever that may be, their constituents or some of the conservative base, do you think they understand that they didn't really go at it when they had the chance in the real process?
You know, I think you're right. I think, sadly, they probably don't. It's pretty arcane for most people. And, you know, in that sense, we ought to be talking tomorrow about Keystone. We ought to be talking about the president's overreach in a number of areas. We ought to be talking about some areas we can work with the president, like trade. Instead, we're spending time on this, and it's going to be a distraction. It's not going to succeed. And frankly, it divides the conference a little bit, and it's not helpful.
You mentioned the agenda. You guys have definitely talked about getting Keystone right out there. What do you think is the right metric for whether this is a productive Congress, say, in the first few months? How many bills do you think you should pass? Do you think you should get Keystone to the president's desk by a certain time? What's in your view, success?
Well, I want to put as many bills as we can on the president's desk and let him make some decisions. Some of those areas, again, we can work together. I'd like to see us work together on trade. I'd like to see us work together on the Syrian authorization. So if we're going to expend force there, that we actually have legal authority to do so. And I think we need to get the normal appropriations bills moving. But there's going to be some areas where we confront. Clearly, we're going to disagree with the president's approach on immigration. We're going to disagree very strongly with him on Obamacare, and we'll probably try to make at least some piecemeal changes there. And we're probably going to, look at an Iran sanctions bill as well. That'll be very bipartisan, and I think present quite a problem to him. So it'll be a mixture of confrontation and compromise.
You mentioned Syria. Do you think there is a deadline at which point a lack of congressional explicit authorization here will make the current ISIS operation illegal if you guys don't authorize it?
The president thinks he has the legal grounds to do this. A number of people agree with that. But he's basing that on legislation that was passed in 2001 and 2002, when most members of Congress that are serving today weren't actually in the Senate or the House. So the reality is we ought to look at something much more specific. I think this is a question of maintaining Congress's role in war-making authority.
Yeah, and do you think Americans viewed that 2001 authorization after 9/11 that was targeted at Afghanistan? Do you think Americans view that as reason to start a new operation against a different enemy in Syria?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm pleased the Republicans at least had a debate over the president's decision to train the Free Syrian Army. Unfortunately, the Democrats in the Senate didn't want to authorize anything, debate anything. We're past the election now. Certainly, this is something that'll be bipartisan. There'll be bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition, which, frankly, if you're dealing with war, it ought to be that way. It ought to fall along party lines. So I think the president, needs to send up a proposal. We need to debate it, change it if necessary, and pass it.
And, Congressman, you've talked a little bit about collaboration. As you know, the president is going out this week and going into the State of the Union, pushing his agenda on jobs and economic populism. Is there any room to at least give him a vote on any of this? The House, as you know, in the past has not put some of these items up to a vote. Would you be open, for example, to a floor vote on a federal minimum wage?
I certainly don't have any problem with a vote on a federal minimum wage, because I know I'm going to vote. But I think, frankly, the whole concept is pretty shaky. When it costs a lot different to live in New York City than it does in, let's say, Oklahoma City. And a lot of the states have individually gone ahead and moved if they felt like it needed to go. To me, that's a more appropriate way to proceed, but I'm quite open to having the debate.
I also want to give you the benefit to respond to, since you're in GOP leadership, to something that White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest just said in this controversy over Steve Scalise being in leadership. Take a listen.
Who they choose to serve in their leadership says a lot about who they are, what their values are, and what the priorities of the conference should be. Mr. Scalise reportedly described himself as David Duke without the baggage, so it'll be up to Republicans to decide what that says about their conference.
Your response?
Pretty cheap shot, unworthy of the White House, quite frankly, and particularly coming from a party that the late Senator Byrd was actually the Senate leader in, and he was a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. Look, this totally blows out of proportion what happened. The single incident 12 years ago, 6 years before Mr. Scalise was in Congress, not even clear that he knew the group that he was addressing had any affiliation with Mr. Duke. So it's just simply, if there was a pattern here, then I think there would be worth raising the issue. But I think this is mostly a matter of score points.
What do you say, Congressman, to folks who say that whether or not you label it as out of bounds, the pattern is this is a member who also was one of the only people in Louisiana to vote against the Martin Luther King holiday? Does that reflect the current values of GOP leadership?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think that's a totally different issue entirely. Look, I supported it. I worked for a member who voted for it at the time, supported it when I was in the state legislature. But there's just simply no pattern here. Remember, some of his strongest defenders have been Democrats, including African-American Democrats like Cedric Richmond, who said there's not a racist bone in his body. Now, if you can produce some evidence, and I've known Steve for 6 years, I've never seen any evidence. He's open. You know, he's a really genuinely decent human being, and that's what most people that know him say on both sides of the political aisle.
All right, Congressman Tom Cole, I know it is a busy season here with the Congress starting up tomorrow.